Okay, everybody, welcome back to the channel today. I'm Kevin, and today we're back to our Second World War topic. Today, we will talk about the inventions during the Second World Wars. Of course, we've already talked about the similar inventions such as weapons or like the other kind like that. But today, we will go a little bit further. We will have a wider range of what was invented in the Second World War. And especially today, we will talk about both weapons and the medicines, and even we'll talk about fuel production. So the creativity has always blossomed in wartime, and it was the development of new weapons and tactics that would take it over centuries in peacetime to be invented will be speed up and will be worked around the clock by the scientists to produce extraordinary new weapons, machines, and also medicines for their soldiers and for the country. So, because of that, during wartime, the amount of invention happens, especially in military, medicines, and about fuel, is much more, let's say, famous, popular, and also regular compared to the others in entertainment course or so whatsoever, like sounds, music, or something like that. They are, let's say, more uncommon. So, a British engineer named Frank Whittle invented a jet engine in 1930, but the British government wasn't interested in his ideas at the moment. So it was the Germans who know about who know about the jet, of course, after the real inventor, but decide to officially produce it into an air fighter was taking a jet into the part of a plane instead of a propeller as usual. And of course, during that time, using propeller to run an airplane is very usual. So the Germans went on design to a highly effective Messerschmitt Me-262. This is a first jet fighter to be used in combat and is also the most complicated one during the Second World War. It had a speed over 870 km per hour. It flew considerably faster than any of the Allies' planes, and the Me-262 was the most deadly adversary for American soldiers. It was very effective and disastrous. The only things that kept the Germany from winning the fight is that's because they produced the amount of air fighter with the jet engines too small. They didn't produce much enough, and also the time they decide to produce it is too late to take back any advantage for the Germany. So it was the decisions of Hitler that this kind of engines should be used for bombers, aircraft instead of fighters, and that's why they have to take another long time trying to explore about how to make the jet engine fit with the bombers and the movement that the air fighters the Me-262 was produced only happened when it was proved to be a disaster with the bombers. Now, moving to the medicines, since the late 19th century, the scientists already knows that there's some fungi could fight against infections, especially from sickness and from things on the world, but they just didn't have the ability and technologies to bring it into real life yet. It was in 1929 a person named Alexander Fleming extracted a substance of a fungus named penicillin, which he named penicillin, the name of the fungus itself, but just being extracted into another form, from penicillin to penicillin. The test showed that these penicillin things could fight against the infections and even destroy them. But the research of his career and that way, and he didn't dive deeper into his own explorations. And because of that, 10 years later, two different people who is Howard Florey and refugee Ernst Chains developed Fleming's work. They work on flaming old research, trying to take more things and more information about the medicine, and within a short time, the new drug was being mass-produced in great vast. And this penicillin raised vast production helped to save thousands of lives for the Allies during the war because of the infections. Military force also need a vast quantity of fuels to run their vehicles, and because of that, they have to get a big source of fuel supplies. But the Germans, on the other hand, had no fuel supplies of their own. The only way that they could get fuel is by the oil deposits of their ally Romania. But this alone was not enough. And because of that, the German scientists decide to make out a technique to produce fuel, especially oil, from things that they have a lot, coal. And this process, which involves mixing coal that was pulverized with high pressure hydrogen gas, was extremely effective that by 1944 they already have 25 synthetic petroleum plants producing at least half of the Germany's fuel. Now, we also need to talk about some things beside with the, let's say, famous and successful inventions. And of course, that the failures. As we both know, inventions need both failures and success so that they could keep on going from the mistake and make the other success even bigger, greater. So, as the war progressed, the revolutionary new weapons were developed. There is some, let's say, example of successful weapons such as the radio guided missiles and bouncing bombs. They are all designed to kill the enemy, let's say, absolutely and exactly where the controllers want them to land. But there is also one thing that was designed to destroy the enemy formations, or to be, let's say, to be more frank, is the concrete fortifications on the heavily defended coastline of France, and that is the Panchen Room. The Panchen Room was designed to explode the the concrete fortification, as I said, of the French on their coastline, and it was designed to have two, let's say, two iron wheels on both sides and a pack of explosive chemistry in the middle. And because of that, it's really useful in theory. The only things that changing the way these things work is that because this thing is really to see, easy to see, and you could shot it from a distance to make it explode. And that thing, therefore, could create the dangers for our side. So, because of that, the scientists decide to get a jet engines. Of course, the things that we are talking about in the first, the first time, the first whole minute of the topics, and they apply the jet engine onto the iron wheel. After that, they fire or they activate the jet engine, and of course, with the vector theories, it push the wheels go forward. But the problem is, at that time, any jet engine didn't have exact same vector, which means they don't have the same force. And because of that, the force have a difference on the one side to another. And because of that, nobody know when the pendulum was put into the real use. Nobody know where it will land. And because of that, when these things really happen, and the soldiers don't really think that their allies aim at the enemy's concrete fortification, but it ends up turning back and rolling toward our ally. And because of that, it's become a disaster. The wheels were driven by rocket engines that was so, let's say, so big, and it was gigantic, like a gigantic catering wheel. It was a disaster because one is unleashed. It was impossible for even the best, let's say, the smartest person on the world to predict which way this thing would go and when will it land or where. All right. So that's all I want to talk to you guys today about the mother of inventions, or we must talk in another word, the inventions during the Second World War. So that's all I want to talk to you guys today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next video. And now it's time for say goodbye then. See ya. Bye bye.